I have one of my favorite journalists, authors, Jessica Yellin. She is an extraordinary, what I always say, investigator as well as an interviewer, being able to find the facts which have been so sorely missed, especially in the past 4 years. And now you can reach her on Instagram. She reports the news all day and night, conducting extraordinary interviews. I've taken so many tips. She doesn't know it. She's a mentor of mine. I watch the best in the world. And so I love to watch her. Welcome to the Playbook, Jessica.
Thank you for that unbelievably flattering intro. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, it's so cool because, all great interviewers, all great journalists have a quality that my brother taught me when I was 18. I was a pre-med student under the pressure of my martial art mom from Jewish Guilt. She's a 3rd degree black belt of Jewish Guilt. And she always said, doctor, lawyer, failure. So I wanted to be rich because I wanted to buy her a house and a car. I go pre-med and my brother's a doctor. I went and visited him and I looked at him at the hospital and I said, I hate hospitals. And he looked at me and goes, what are you talking about? You're pre-med. You hate hospitals? I go, I want to be a sports doctor, sidelines and training rooms. I'm not going to be in a hospital. He goes, David, be more interested than interesting. And that's been something that has followed me my entire life. It's part of the reason I do the Playbook. It's part of the reason you're so good at what you do. And I'm afraid it's a quality that people are missing today. They take things on the surface, on, clickbait, on false news and a variety of things. And how do we encourage people to be more interested than interesting?
Such a fantastic question. I think it's absolutely the right approach. And I think it's inside people, and they have been taught through a variety of messages to sort of suppress it and look to outside sources for authority. For me, when I'm doing an interview, I have the best interviews when I just ask what I'm curious about. When I throw away the notes and it's not about what's going to make news or what's going to be the question that's going to be in the cycle, but I really want this person to explain something I don't understand. Those come out the best. The challenge is a lot of times when you're working inside a traditional newsroom, you're under pressure to break news. You have to come up with the thing that'll be sexy and splashy at this moment that might get pick up and buzz, but that's not always the thing that's going to inform your audience the most. And so people come to the news often and get the buzz and the flash and actually don't get their curiosity satisfied. And so they go in this bad cycle of not expecting to get their curiosity satisfied, be less curious, etc. We have to find sources that spark that awe and intrigue in people so they feel it more.
And speaking to an audience has become, to me, a real detriment to our biggest sources of news. And you can see that since you were at CNN early on, and obviously they've moved in one direction and Fox has moved in another direction. And it's really to appease an audience and sell commercial time and to get eyeballs. And one of the advantages of I believe, of Instagram, for example, or other social media platforms is that you're able to find your own frequency. It's dangerous, but it's also very powerful that we can show different sides of different perspectives of different pieces of information, because a lot of times there isn't fake news. There's just two different opinions of what the facts are. And that's how life works. How are you addressing kind of this new world of perspective and the ability to share your own frequency?
I love that phrase, your own frequency. And I think that we're moving into a new era in the media. You found a voice and a frequency. I'm finding one. And I think there are audiences that are gravitating toward, the word authentic is cliche, but authentic voices that sort of speak to something that's in them, like a yearning to know a thing or have a feeling of community, and away from sort of established media brands. I think in the future, it'll be, I like this reporter, not I follow that news. And so it might be one reporter from here and one reporter from there and someone on Insta and you and blah, blah, blah. So people collect the voices that resonate with them. And for me, it's been a process of sort of discovering what's really true for me in terms of the voice that I want to put into the world. And then it's like this lighthouse effect where the audience shows up. And for me, what I like to do is take really complicated ideas in the conversation and explain them in a way anybody would get. So not making it stupid, respecting your intelligence, but saying, we use a ton of jargon. Like, you don't need to know what this lingo on Capitol Hill means. In reality, it just means they have to vote twice on the same thing. It'll be done in an hour, and I'll tell you what happened then. And part of, for me, breaking things down and making them relatable means that more people feel like this information is accessible, that it's theirs to know. That means they'll get more curious, they'll listen and read more, and then hopefully participate in the world.
And another thing that you touched upon, which is extraordinary, is that as you have individual brands, these individual frequencies that people will go to, I don't think we understand. I'm older, so I have a little bit of a better perspective on the size, scope, and scale of the audience. One of the things that was even shocking to me as I kind of entered into content and inspired by, younger people in the social media was, holy moly, do these kids know? Like, they would get mad at me. They're like, oh my God, we only had 44,000 views. And in my mind, I'm like, that's 3 arenas. Like, if somebody would have told me that somebody would watch Dave Meltzer for even 4 or 5 minutes in 3 or 4 arenas at one time, that was to me unfathomable. And now it's getting to be sublime in the fact that this audience is 4.4 billion and growing. And the fastest growing section is not the young kids, because they're just given, right? They're going to jump on TikTok the minute they get a phone. But it's people my age, 45 to 65, that are really starting to engage on these platforms, which gives us a huge leg up to provide information at our interpretation. And I will tell you, just so you know, one of my greatest challenges is transcoding complex ideas into palatable information. So I'm not talking about wave variance like Einstein, and people are like, what is Dave Meltzer doing? Or I get too spiritual where, I'm talking about woo-woo things. So there is a transcoding that needs to be to understand your spectrum. But someone that comes from the big spectrum world of, when you're on CNN, when you're on national network, you're used to the understanding of 80 million households. But when you now are on Instagram and you have 500,000 households that are really engaged with you and interacting, can you see that we're at the earlier stages, and someday that individuals like you and I can't even fathom how big we can be compared to in the past? You could never compete with a network. Now we actually can.
1,000%. And I feel like it's on the cusp of exploding. And the difference is you hit on it. When I was at CNN or any of the big networks, you'd be there with a camera person and a producer, and there's people to catch things back at home base and all this infrastructure. And at the end of the day, I'm talking into a camera lens. And when the light goes off, I have no idea how it went over. And the audience might be huge, but did I connect? And the difference is when I'm on Insta and talking through this new medium, I get immediate response. First, if you're live, you see people asking questions and they'll say, I don't know what that word meant. What's that word? Or, oh, my sister had that exact thing happen. Here's what we learned. And then I can ask the expert. So you get this immediate feedback. And so you know how to adjust your communication style to help more people feel engaged and informed. And you can draw on the expertise of the audience. I can't tell you how many tips I get or nuance I learn. So I think that this is the cusp of what the future is. And we think of social media as this massive distribution means. I think we haven't even discovered the way we're going to distribute this stuff. Like, I don't have a way to get my videos easily to an audience that doesn't rely on an algorithm where I can just, you're my audience, you want my stuff, I'm sending it to you every day at 5 o'clock. What's the best way to do that? I haven't found that thing that's going to exist. We might all have our own newscasts someday.
Well, I have something for you. I have search.dmeltzer.com. I have my own search engine that will search all of my content. So I give that to and I have to send that to you. We can get yours up and running because I think it's a good solution for what you're looking for.
I like that. I'm learning something. Maybe it exists.
And which is about what you're about. Is I love one of the things about doing interviews, and now that I've been doing them, is I joke around, but like when I'm executive coaching people for years, I've said to myself, it's the best thing because people are paying me all this money and I'm sitting on the phone giving them ideas. And half of them I'm sitting there going, hey, Dave, that's a great idea. You should do that too. And they think I'm some kind of, I feel like when I'm interviewing, especially someone like you, that I'm the audience. I'm just learning. And like, as you say things, I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Like the universe has given me this unbelievable, graduate degree. I call it e-school now. I go to e-school every playbook that I do, that I'm learning from the greatest minds, the greatest practitioners on earth. But with that said, there's so much out there. There's so much noise. That's why I created the search engine. That's why I'm going to share it with you to make my own, our own Yellen search engine. But how do you deal with the noise? Because you only have your frequency. The strength of your signal isn't that of other people's yet, or is mine, but it's potential. And then you have your own spectrum, but there's so much noise. How do you deal with the noise today? And how do you think it's going to affect you in the future?
So this is something I grapple with because, in fact, like my brand is called News, Not Noise. My whole mission is to help the audience pick signal from noise in the information landscape. Because I find that so much of what we put out is static and it shuts down learning, and that makes people apathetic and not want to participate. And that's not a democracy, right? So how do we reverse that? And there's two levels of it for me. One is, how do I pick news from noise in the actual information landscape? For me, that's muscle memory. Like I just, I have my 10,000 hours and I just can bing, 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 bing through. I'm like sometimes like a skimming like a fighter pilot's looking at the sky for bogeys incoming, and I just see things, and so that's, for me, it's, people are like, how do you get your news? It's hard to say, like all the sources. When it comes, there's another piece of this though, which is, I think that in order to learn, and that's what watching the news is, you need to be in a state of calm, not in a state of panic. And, we don't need science. Like, we know the science. If you're in fight or flight, you're not learning, you're reacting. And the way we tell the news, especially in TV news, is deliberately engineered these days to compete for your fear and anxiety, because it has been decided that conflict and fear makes you watch, and that's the only way to generate ratings. Yes, we know it's one way. My contention is that it's not the only way. And so what I seek to do is to provide you the information and help you stay calm and not check out. But so that also means I need to be calm. Like I can't get all spun up. So the struggle for me is to like be in my manic news cycle, which I get into, where I love to be on the adrenaline ride. And then you're like, no, I have to, that's noise itself. Like the energy can be noise. And so how do you stay centered so you communicate to an audience from a place of presence so they can hear and learn in a place of presence themselves?
Well, I share my nickname with you. I told others when I saw you were coming on the Playbook, I said, oh, good, because she's a ferocious Buddha. And the idea of a ferocious Buddha, yeah, is that you are ferocious enough through all the chaos of fear, primal fear, like you mentioned, the Freudian fears, those 4 fears, but also the secondary fears that especially the networks dwell on, the need to be right, the need to be offended, separate, inferior, superior, anxious, frustrated, angry, guilty, resentful. And they go through it. And yet I watch you with that news that carries that frequency, that energy, and you're able to stop. And that's ferocious. If you can stop in the middle of chaos and angst and fear, but then you're able to drop to what I call your higher self, the higher frequency of neutrality. And that way, then you can roll people in the right trajectory, not into a resistant, overselling, back-end selling, lying, manipulating, and cheating stance, which then separates us more. You're the ferocious Buddha that is strong enough to say, no, let's all stop for a moment and breathe. And let's use our higher sense of learning, our higher sense of being, our higher neutrality, and let's all roll in the right trajectory together and appreciate the things that we have the same. And you also have a great technique of allowing people to appreciate the differences instead of creating more separation. For you, is this a conscious practice, or is something that you were born with, or something that you had to develop? Because it's definitely the tool of the future, I think.
First of all, I feel very seen. And also, I've never heard anybody use this kind of language around this. So this is, thank you. Like, that's very helpful structure for me. I I'm a little speechless. I was not conscious of doing it. It started, and then I became conscious of how helpful and effective it is, both as a means to engage an audience in a place where they can learn, and to keep me centered so that I can continue to do this work in such a chaos universe. So it's part of it started because I was doing I was covering a story that was really hard for the audience. And I said, I know that this is emotionally like upsetting to a lot of you. So I'm going to pause from the news and say, if you need a resource to call, here's a phone number for a hotline for those of you who are bothered by this story in a personal way. And I got so much feedback from people saying, thank you, that let me continue to watch the story. I realized how much people need that, and that we shouldn't separate wellness from learning about your world. They're interconnected. You stay informed to participate in community and be whole in your community.
And to that point too, I've noticed, hopefully I'm not taking it too much on a tangent, but the way that you do things, I think of Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, where, the news makes me feel like I have to turn it off, because it's like, okay, we're going to push this boulder all day long up at the top of the hill, and then you're going to wake up at the bottom of the hill again.
I know, it's so true.
And so, but your capability of what you do allows us to plateau and grow. Like you can't keep expanding and growing and accelerating in your knowledge if you haven't accepted both sides of a story or utilized your higher power of thinking to figure out how we can appreciate what's being said, meaning how does this add value to our lives, not diminish, dissolve, or dissipate our own existence, which is ironic because the COVID actually, for the first time, the whole world has to think about their own human existence for the very first time as a whole, which causes that anxiety. Do you see this ability to continue to grow with your audience, meaning not just the size of the audience, but I see your audience growing with you, that it's, episodical, that you're not just starting over at the bottom of the end of the day and the next day?
Yes. And I'll give you an example that is so satisfying for me. At the beginning, when I first started this, I would talk about politics. Like my main mission initially, it's grown beyond this. My main mission was to help a lot of people who are panicked about the state of our world, but couldn't listen to the screaming negative news, like they turn it off, help them find a way to stay informed so that they could participate and be more informed and feel like they have more control in their world. Because democracy is about all of us participating. You can't check out. So that's my view. So at the beginning, I got all these people following who would message me all the time saying, this is unacceptable. Who will fix this? Or who's in charge of this? They need to be fired. And now I get, this is unacceptable. What can I do?
Wow.
So for me, that's like the whole game. Like that's a home run, whatever, and I think it's the job of journalists to inform you so you're empowered, right? And so what are the other areas we can do that in? It's not just politics. It's like finance, parenting, wellness, all these areas where you take these big ideas and make them relatable in a way people genuinely connect and can take action in their own lives.
Which is amazing, because my personal mission in life is to empower over 1 billion people to be happy. And the way that I'm going to get there is through 1,000 people like you, that I'm blessed to be around the most powerful millionaires, billionaires, entrepreneurs, celebrities, athletes, entertainers, media stars like yourself that can and have the ability to empower 1,000 people to empower 1,000 people simply to be happy through this process of learning. And you're definitely one of those 1,000 to me. And I'm so confident that together we can create a collective consciousness of happiness where people can unite and come back together for the greater good. And although I know people may not see it during these times, I think with accelerated change comes the opportunity for this transformation to occur. And you're definitely a steward of that. And I'm a huge fan. I just hope that I lived up to your expectation as an interviewer. I was telling you earlier, nothing makes me more nervous than interviewing someone of great capacity like you and Katie Couric, my favorites. So thank you so much.